On this week's NESN Patriots podcast, we preview what could be the final game of the Bill Belichick era in New England. We discuss the uncertainty that continues to swirl around the legendary head coach, and then take a look ahead at the Patriots draft positioning and how it could change based on this weekend's results. Hello and welcome back into the NESN Patriots podcast. My name is Zach Cox, joined as always by Dakota Randall. It is week 18. It is the final week of the Patriots season, and it may be the final week of Bill Belichick's Patriots coaching tenure. Patriots close out the season against the New York Jets this Sunday at Gillette Stadium. Since we talked last here, Dakota, the Patriots have played a game. They lost in Buffalo on Sunday. You were there. It was a weird game. It was a competitive game, but it ended up going pretty similarly to a lot of the Patriots games this season. I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on it because obviously the focus now is on this week and the uncertainty surrounding Bill Belichick. But any final thoughts from your trip up to Buffalo?
No, I think it was just kind of representative of the Patriots season as a whole. Like, you know, squint and you can see them being competitive and better than their record would indicate. On the other side of that, I thought a lot of it had to do with an awful game by Josh Allen. And at the end of the day, it was just dysfunctional, right? Like, you know, there was a special teams issues with really two missed kicks. There was the obvious unbelievably bad start on offense. I do think a lot of that had to do with Bailey Zappi. Like, maybe you absolve him on one of the picks. The other two, I think, were really his fault. So it was just kind of a continuation of a lot of the stuff we've seen this year where in some respects, you know, they're better than you think, but at the end of the day, they really are who you think they are, which is a dysfunctional mess that ultimately isn't good enough. So
yeah, I think that statement would probably apply to Bailey Zappi as well. It seems like anytime he's able to generate a little bit of momentum, he had a lot of it coming out of the Denver game, then comes out and throws 3 interceptions in basically the first 20 minutes of this game. He'll get one final chance this Sunday to kind of audition for whatever his role will be next year, but I still don't think anybody can look at him and say that he's anything more than a solid, respectable backup at this point. And certainly the Patriots are going to be looking for a new quarterback this offseason. But the big story this week, the big news this week, really probably the biggest news in sports this week is, will this be Bill Belichick's final game with the Patriots? We are, 3 days out from the game at this point, and we still don't know. We don't know definitively in either direction. I think the general sentiment, the general feeling is that Bill Belichick is probably gone after this season. If I had to make a prediction, that's what I would say. You've seen a lot of other reporters kind of feel similarly and convey those same kind of sentiments. It's not 100% set in stone, it seems. According to what we've read and what we've heard, they still have to have their kind of year-end sit-down meeting between Belichick and Robert Kraft, which will probably happen after this game on Sunday. And who knows where things go from there. But I don't know. I think that it is probably Bill Belichick's last game. Dakota, what's your feeling on what the Patriots will do and what the Patriots should do here in your mind?
I have no idea. None. I mean, I think I would agree with you that if I had to guess right now, that he will be gone. You know, I just wonder, you know, how long it could drag on, because do they want to pull off a trade? If they do want to pull off a trade, how long could this thing be drawn out? Part of me feels like if there is a chance for a trade that's already been sort of talked about in the back channels, and like, you're not just gonna make this thing hang around for 2 or 3 weeks while you figure out trade compensation. Like, people got to get ready with their new teams, you know. But I think we all, a month ago, were pretty certain that this was it. Like, there was a finality to it. And then now that Judgment Day is here, it seems like maybe the percentage has moved closer to 50-50 or 60-40. Part of that might just be getting closer to that day, right? Like, you get closer to it and you wonder if your take or your opinion on it has been right all along. But also, I think, the way the team's played, I doubt that has any sort of bearing on Kraft's mind. But, I think certainly this would feel like an easier, more obvious decision if the team completely cratered after Germany. Then there would be just no doubt in anybody's mind. But they haven't done that. So I think it does complicate it, maybe just for us, probably not for Robert Kraft. But my assumption is that he's gone. But I think it's, I think it is maybe more like 60-40. And after reading that Herald story today from Andrew Callahan and Doug Hyde, no, it doesn't paint a good picture of Bill Belichick in terms of, his personnel and staff shortcomings, but it does sort of, in my opinion, point the blame at a lot of people other than him in terms of, assistants and staffers and some different players and stuff like it. I think it seems like people in the building believe he still totally has it as a head coach. It's really just the staff and the personnel. But to me, the failures in those regards are so significant that it leaves Kraft with no choice and you have to move on.
Well, that's the biggest thing too, is he's the one in charge of assembling that staff and assembling that roster.
That's part of the job.
If you end up with a dysfunctional roster and a coaching staff that's ineffective, it's Bill Belichick's fault because he's the guy who put those guys in those positions to start with. I think that's what makes this situation so complicated and so difficult for Robert Kraft, because I think we're in agreement that if you're talking about strictly from a head coach standpoint, you're probably not finding an upgrade over Bill Belichick this offseason. If it was just a question of, can this guy still coach? I think the answer is pretty clearly yes. And as you mentioned there, it seems like players on the team feel that way. Certainly, it was interesting hearing comments from Devin McCourty on EEI yesterday, basically saying, you're not going to find an upgrade here. The team is playing well for him. It's playing hard for him. The defense is still playing very well. And all of those things are true. I mean, we've said it before. I think if you could keep Bill Belichick the coach and bring in somebody else to handle some of these personnel things, I think that would be the ideal situation. I just don't know how that is feasible given how long Bill Belichick has done that job and the size of his personality and everything like that, and his stature in the organization. And then if that's the case, it comes down to weighing, okay, what's more important here? Do you want to keep Bill Belichick as the head coach if it also means keeping the structure that's made all of these poor personnel decisions? Or do you want to overhaul that, even though it probably results in a downgrade of the actual kind of game planning and on-field coaching, which is why it's not an easy decision. And I think it's why it's sort of trended, as you were mentioning, closer toward 50-50, it seems, over the last, 2 months or so. It's hard to say the Patriots have been playing well and they've been improved because they're 2-6 over their last 8 games, but you haven't seen any of those blowouts since the Dolphins game. Those last 6 losses, all of them by 10 or fewer points. 5 of them were 1-score games. And a lot of those games, you can really point to 1 or 2 just kind of costly mistakes that really cost them the game. So it's tough.
One quick note on that. Someone on Twitter did a quick thing where they flipped all the 1-score game results in the NFL to see where each team would be, or in each conference, and the Patriots would be the 7th seed at 8-8. And you'd think, and what does that really mean? Nothing. But ultimately, you look at the other teams that are still in the playoffs in that scenario, and it's Ravens, Chiefs, Bills, Jags, Chargers, Dolphins, Patriots. So other than the Chargers, it's kind of holding there at all the other best teams in the AFC, and the same thing in the NFC, where it's still a bunch of the teams that are already in the playoffs. The only team that has a dramatically different fate are the Bears, who would be in at 10-6. So, I mean, if the Patriots, if nothing else, I think it just shows that they have had an atypically large amount of 1-score games go against them. And so is that reflective of who they really are, or is it reflective of bad luck? I think it's up for debate, but I think you could argue both.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously the Patriots don't want their ceiling to be 8-8 and sneaking into the playoffs, but I think 8-8 and sneaking into the playoffs would have been more than enough this season to kind of secure Bill Belichick through the Don Shula record there. Obviously didn't work out that way. We'll see if there's any updated reporting in these next couple of days. We're going to talk to Bill Belichick one more time Friday morning Highly doubt that he's going to say, "Hey guys, this is my final game." But there could be. It wouldn't be shocking if there's the Saturday morning or Sunday morning Adam Schefter report that says, "Hey guys, strong indications that this will be Bill Belichick's final game with the Patriots." I don't think that's a guarantee either way, because as you mentioned, the trade possibility complicates some of that. But at this point, this is sort of all the lack of confirmation that we have. So going into this actual game on Sunday, again, maybe we'll get some sort of more concrete confirmation one way or the other. But if it stays kind of status quo like this, where it still seems completely up in the air and can really go in either direction, it's going to be really fascinating to see what the vibe in the stadium is like, what the kind of crowd reaction is like, especially because it could be a snow game too, so we could get that on top of it. But it'll be like, are we going to see some sort of recognition from the crowd to Bill Belichick, even if it's not a done deal that he's gone? Are we going to see a standing ovation or a "thank you, Bill" chant or anything like that in this game? What do you think, Dakota? What's your kind of prediction for how this ambiance is going to be, what it's going to be like at Gillette on Sunday?
I absolutely think there's going to be some sort of organic acknowledgement of Belichick. Whether
there should be, right? Yeah.
Well, there absolutely should be, and whether that's fed into by the Patriots, whether we talked about this yesterday, whether the scoreboard operator holds it on Bill for an extra 5 or 10 seconds, that would surprise me. But I don't think it's going to even take that. I think, the fans aren't stupid, and especially if you're coming to this meaningless game against the Jets in bad weather, like that has to be, you're a diehard fan at that point. The variables in play with Belichick, like it's what everyone's thinking the whole day. And all it takes is a couple people to start a Belichick chant, and then you're going. I also just think that we've kind of reached this assumption, and maybe this is sort of like media echo chamber stuff where we're so close to it, but like that we assume that all the fans also believe that Belichick should go, or that they're all in the same boat. I don't necessarily know if that's true. Like, I think if you just listen to the Sports Hub or Felger and Maz, like, yeah, that's what it sounds like. But, the people that call into those shows call into them for a reason. It's because they're a fan of those shows, and meaning they probably co-opted some of those opinions at some level. And the opinion of most people on those shows is that Belichick should go. But if you remove yourself from that, I'm not saying you've done this, I'm just saying I think a lot of people, if you remove yourself from that sort of, echo chamber, Boston media stuff, a lot of people don't think he should go. I mean, I saw a poll on a local news station this morning where they ran it saying, "Do you think Bill Belichick should leave?" And it was 80-20 in favor of him staying. It was like 1,000 votes, which isn't a lot, but it's a pretty healthy margin. And I think if you talk to more casuals or people that aren't so glued to this topic day in and day out, like we are, and like some of the people that call into radio shows are, a lot of people think he should stay. And I think a lot of those people might show up to the game on Sunday, and they might make that opinion known. Or at the very least, like a "thank you, Bill" chant. Boston sports fans are smart, and they know what's going on here. And it would not surprise me if some chant like that happens, and I personally expect it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too about maybe the more casual level of fan. It's a pretty easy and it's a valid opinion to say, yeah, this team hasn't been good in a couple of years, but this is Bill Belichick. He gave us 6 Super Bowls. I'm willing to give him a little bit of leeway. I want him to be here as long as he coaches. Like, I would rather have Belichick on the Patriots and maybe not be winning Super Bowls than have him coach for the Chargers for the last couple of years of his career and have to watch that, have to watch Tom Brady leave and then watch Bill Belichick leave. I think there certainly is a portion of the fan base that has that opinion. And again, that's not an invalid opinion. There's the other portion that says, hey, I want this team to be back to winning Super Bowls right now, and I don't see it happening with Bill Belichick's personnel moves. But certainly some of the people who aren't kind of scouring the NFL transaction wire and getting angry that Vidarian Lowe is starting at right tackle or left tackle, rather.
Or parroting Mike Felger.
Yes, or parroting Mike Felger. There's definitely a portion that says, hey, this guy did a lot of good for this team, and why are we trying to run him out the door? I've even heard some of that from my own like family members. They're like, why is everybody so mad at Bill?
Yes, I've had more people, I think, come up to me and say they're not really moving on from Bill, are they? Like almost shocked that it's even a topic. Then I have people saying like, so they're moving on from Belichick, right? Like I've had the other thing more often. And I think that's because a lot of people who go to the games, like there's a lot of people who go to these games that they're not like just glued to Twitter, following every step of this, reading all the drama stuff. Like they want to go drink beers, watch the Patriots. They have a, relatively strong idea of what's going on, but they look at it as like, it's Bill. It's Bill at 6 Super Bowls. It's, the hoodie, kiss the rings, like all that kind of stuff. And they don't want to see it end. And I think those people, I would expect it like late in the game.
Yeah.
Regardless of what the result looks like, that's when I would probably expect it versus like some all game chant going on.
You just described that. I'm so jealous of those people that don't have to be glued to Twitter and following every single bit of minutia for this team. It must be nice.
Oh, if I could be like Mac Jones, who the other day tweeted for the first time in 364 days. He has 3 tweets essentially over the last 2 years. Like in May 2022 was like the other one. He has 3 tweets. One just says Big Al with a bunch of exclamation points about Al Horford, I'm assuming a playoff game. One about DeMar Hamlin, and then one about that just says the new one that says Roll Tide, which is kind of a perfect summation of how boring he is, as a public figure, I guess. But yeah, just if I could tweet 3 times in 2 years, oh my God, the jealousy that I have.
So side note, I'm very curious to see whether we have a chance to talk to Mac Jones at all before this season ends, because we basically have locker room today, locker room tomorrow, and then post game, and then locker clean out day on Monday. So we haven't seen much of Mac Jones since the move to Bailey Zappi, and he has not spoken on the record with anyone. But it would be nice to get his perspective on this whole thing at some point before the season ends, and it would also be nice to get some resolution to this Bill Belichick situation soon. We don't know when that's going to happen. A lot of times in the NFL, when a team fires its head coach or its general manager, it happens on that Black Monday, the day after the final week of the regular season. There have been multiple reports that probably isn't going to happen with Bill Belichick. It's going to be a longer process for whatever reason. I think it behooves Robert Kraft, if he is going to move on, to make that decision quickly, so you can start the process of finding whoever is going to be that next guy. Even if you think Gerard Mayo is the next guy, you still need to and should go through kind of the due diligence of bringing in some different guys and interviewing them and whatnot. And obviously, the longer you wait, the more people are going to get snatched up there before you can even meet with them. But
yeah, I just think the fascinating dynamic here, we've talked about it a lot, is like what happens Monday.
Yeah, like we're scheduled to speak with Bill Belichick Monday morning.
And if it's just, and most coaches get fired that Monday, they don't have that Monday press conference if they're going to get fired. So like, and even if like, people talk about like there's the meeting next week, they're going to have the meeting and maybe Bill saves his job there. But so like, is there a chance that we essentially talk to a lamed up coach on Monday who's like fired 4 days later? I just don't even know. Like, has that ever happened? I can't even. It feels unorthodox. Maybe that's just a good representation of how weird the situation is as a whole. But like, we're going to talk to this guy 3 more times over the next like 4 days. He'll probably be the same in all of them, and then he might just get fired a week from now. It's weird. It's
crazy. And then if it's a situation where they say, hey, we're delaying Bill's season end press conference until Wednesday, then you're like, okay, well then that probably means that something's happening.
Or like maybe after locker room cleanout availability on Monday, which whenever that is, if they put it after that, maybe that sends up the antenna so the players don't get asked about it, like.
Well, then the players are going to get asked. They're going to get asked about it regardless.
No, but I mean, like if we find out like we have locker room Monday, but Bill's press conference isn't until afterward.
Mm-hmm.
And
then it's still like an uncertainty kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it just means like that way we don't have the opportunity to then go into the locker room right after he gets fired. Because if you get, in theory, if he got fired Monday morning, we could then go ask all the players about it. I just don't see that happening. I just think the whole thing is weird. And it's going to be interesting to follow different breadcrumbs as they get laid out.
Yeah. And I mean, and then if it does happen, again, we're rehashing the same kind of stuff we've talked about for months now. But if it does happen, then you get a whole coaching search. And this is most likely not going to be a situation where Robert Kraft releases a statement and says, "We thank Bill Belichick for all of everything he done for the franchise. Gerard Mayo is our new head coach." Like, it is most likely going to be a process that takes at least a couple of weeks to go through. So then I've never covered a coaching search before. Even the offensive coordinator one last year was something where there's news breaking every 6 hours, it seemed, and this will be that times 100 if it ends up happening. So,
one question for you in that, maybe you might have the answer because I don't. If they just interview and then promote Gerard Mayo, does that satisfy the Rooney Rule, or does it have to be an external candidate of color?
I believe I have to look into the exact wording of it. I believe it's an external candidate, and I believe it's 2 now for a head coaching job. Yeah. I don't know if that changes if it's a internal promotion of a minority candidate. We'll have to kind of make sure we're up to date on all those rules, because I know they've changed a couple times in the last few years. But again, knowing how like buttoned up Kraft tends to be with this kind of stuff and how prepared he likes to be, I'd be very surprised if it's just, hey, here's the job, Gerard Mayo, even if it's just an opportunity to bring in other coaches and pick their brains and see what their kind of philosophies are like. Like, it would be a big missed opportunity in my mind if you just kind of forego that and say, hey, we're going with this guy, no questions asked. But again, we'll see how Robert Kraft chooses to handle all of it if it does end up happening. Hopefully by the time we record this podcast next week, whenever that is, we will at least know whether it will be Bill Belichick coaching this team or somebody else coaching this team.
How about a 3-way? I want a 3-way trade. I want Patriots, Chargers, Titans, Bill and a 3rd-round pick to the Chargers, first round pick to Tennessee, Mike Vrabel to Patriots. That's where my head's at. I want the most nuclear scenario.
I wonder if there's ever been.
I don't even hate that trade.
Have they even has there been a 3-way trade in the NFL
for a coach involving coach?
Well, I have to imagine it's not involving a coach, but I feel like you don't even see 3-way trades in the NFL regardless, you know?
Yeah, you're right. I don't even know if that is. Yeah, maybe not. I have to imagine it's legal. I mean,
you would think so. I don't know. I'm down. I'm always down for chaos. So that would be at least a fun thing to do. But moving on from coach talk, the other big story this week is where the Patriots draft pick will end up falling. That window has continued to shrink over these last couple of weeks. We now know that it will be somewhere between number 2, because the Panthers have clinched the NFL's worst record. So the Chicago Bears will get the number 1 pick. Patriots can fall anywhere between number 2 and number 5. There are some analytics models out there that say it's like a 99.5% chance that the Patriots will be in the top 5. So maybe there is some sort of very, very unlikely scenario involving like 8 different ties or something like that. That can make them fall below that. But for all intents and purposes, they're going to be picking 2, 3, 4, or 5. Obviously, a loss to the Jets would improve their chances of picking at number 2 or number 3, while a win would increase the chances of them picking at 4 or 5. But even if they do beat the Jets, there still is a scenario where they could win and still get the number 2 pick. An unlikely scenario, but there's a way for it to shake out. I know you spent far too much time in the NFL draft simulator predictor machine earlier this week. So you don't need to go through the entire tweet thread of it, but what's the spark notes of what Patriots fans need to know about this whole draft pick situation?
Well, I'll get to that in a second. But first, I have a boned pick with Pete Schrager and Steve Kornacki. I don't know if you've been seeing this, but like Steve, first of all, you and I have put in the legwork on the draft stuff. We have done more draft related coverage for the Patriots this year than any outlet, period. We've looked at it way too, like, more deeply than anybody else, to the detriment of our own mental health, probably. And then like this week, I've seen Steve Kornacki came out and was like, guys, there's actually, believe it or not, still a chance the Patriots can get the number 2 pick. And if a big part of it is if the Falcons beat the Saints. And I'm sitting here like, we've been telling you that all along. That's not a surprise. And there's far more to it than that. And everyone's like, wow, Kornacki coming from the top rope. Pete Schrager's like, I can't believe that. Wow, Steve Kornacki is amazing. He figured this out. And I'm like, I'm just stewing like no crap, and also just an aside, Steve Kornacki is not the best election night big board runner. That is John King over at CNN. Boston University's finest. That's just a personal opinion. But anyway, and I don't want to make this an anti-Steve Kornacki podcast, but I just think he's overrated.
Not a fan of khakis.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, you said it. They can finish anywhere from 2 to 5. I guess if I had to guess, because I think they're going to beat the Jets, even though the snow makes things interesting, I think if they beat the Jets, they probably land at 4. That said, the Giants are ahead of them in strength of schedule, but just based on how some of the other games look, like I think it's entirely possible the Patriots finish at 4. But that's huge. And but again, it's really hard to look at this whole draft order and know what to make of it, because it kind of all hinges on what do the Bears do. I think we know now that the Cardinals aren't going to take a quarterback. They're going to stick with Kyler Murray, probably try and go after Marvin Harrison one way or the other. But what do the Bears do with Justin Fields? And if the Bears are willing to move, let's just say for the sake of argument that the current order stays the same: Bears 1, Commanders 2, Patriots 3, Cardinals 4, and the Bears are willing to trade with let's say the Commanders, and then they move down to 2, and the Commanders move up to 1, take Caleb Williams. The Bears aren't going to sit at 2 and take a quarterback at that point. I don't think they're going to take maybe the top tackle, maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. And then you have Patriots somewhere at 3, 4, 5, and they're still right there to either take Drake May or Jaden Daniels, unless teams trade up ahead of them. So I know Patriots fans are kind of freaking out that they're going to lose out on a franchise quarterback. I think the door is still wide open for them to get one of those top 3 guys. And it looks like some evaluators might be starting to put Jaden Daniels ahead of at least Drake May, some over Caleb Williams. So I don't, and also there's all this love now for Michael Penix after what he did the other night. So I don't think there's really any sort of disaster scenario in play. I think if the Patriots want a new franchise quarterback, they're either going to be in a position to draft him or have more ammunition than anybody else to trade up and get them. So I just wouldn't worry about it if I'm Patriots fans. But the other thing I'll add to all this, because there's so many other games that matter this weekend for the strength of schedule stuff. The real one that does matter the most is Falcons Saints. If the Falcons beat the Saints and the Patriots lose to the Jets, Patriots are kind of sitting pretty at that point, and they really have the inside track toward getting the number 2 pick. If the Saints beat the Falcons, it gets real tough. So that's the one to watch.
Things really do hinge on what the Bears want to do with that top pick. I know there's been a lot of groundswell lately of support for Justin Fields within the Bears team, within the Bears locker room. And if they do, because if this is a situation where the Bears say, we like Justin Fields, but we can't pass up on this opportunity to draft Caleb Williams. If they finish first, then the Commanders finish second, and they're like, well, Sam Howell's not the answer. We need a quarterback too. Then it could be a situation where, hey, even if you want one of these top 2 guys, they're going to be off the board. Sorry, hope you like Jaden Daniels or one of these other players. But it seems there's a much stronger chance now than there was maybe a few weeks ago of those guys either potentially sliding or the teams in those top picks being more willing to deal than they might otherwise be, saying it's okay. We'll take our chances on Caleb Williams being a generational talent, and we'll give another team a chance to draft him. And also one more final point on this. Obviously, we're going to spend hours and hours and hours and hours talking about all of this draft related stuff over the next couple of months. But we were having a conversation with Phil Perry over at NBC Sports Boston in the locker room the other day, and it does seem to me like the gap between that top 3, the consensus top 3 in this draft, which for a long time was Caleb Williams, Drake May, Marvin Harrison Jr., the gap between that group and maybe the second tier does seem to be closing. If you look at what a lot of the smart draft analysts are talking about, there's a lot of love for Jaden Daniels. There's a lot of love for Roma Dudze, the wide receiver from Washington. There's a lot of love from Malik Neighbors, the wide receiver from LSU, and obviously Michael Penix light the world on fire the other night at in the college football playoff. He's got the injury issues that people are going to need to work through, but watching him on tape there, you say, wow, that's a guy that looks like a first round quarterback. So I think this is going to be a situation where that gap closes by the time the draft comes. It's not, wow, if you're not getting a top 3 pick, you have this massive drop off from that until the next tier of draft talent. I think this isn't the worst year to, even if the Patriots do finish 4th and aren't able to trade up, I don't think this is a situation where you say, man, like they really missed out on this elite level of talent, and now they're left with like a B- at number 4. I think this draft is deeper than I think some people thought it was a couple of weeks ago or a couple months ago.
Yeah, and I would agree. And I would just say, the one thing that's simple for the Patriots and all this is if they lose to the Jets, they have a top 3 pick.
Yeah,
and I think that again, that's even though, like you said, the gap has closed, I still think being at number 3 and effectively being in control of Marvin Harrison at that spot, or I mean, maybe just take Jaden Daniels, but you are at that point in control of Marvin Harrison Jr. And the lust for him, I think, is going to be so high that, like, maybe the Bears, let's say the Bears want to move on, are going to keep Justin Fields. Yeah, could a team like the Jets or the Titans or Atlanta offer them some ridiculous package? Sure. But, I think if I'm the Bears, I wouldn't shock me at all if their mindset is, those packages are great, but we're going to take a slightly lesser package from the Patriots in terms of draft table value because it gives us Marvin Harrison Jr. So I think that the control of that asset it would be a huge win for the Patriots one way or the other. But the only other point I'll make, there's also, I think, plenty of reason to believe that the Giants won't target a quarterback, or at least, I don't know. They can finish number 2, and if they're in that spot, it's going to be a lot. I think it'd be hard for them to turn down Drake May, but a lot of the people covering that team say they don't think it's going to happen. They put the money in Daniel Jones. They're going to go tackle a receiver, and so I think there's a real chance here that 3 of the top 5 teams, the 3 of the teams that are in the top 5 aren't going after quarterbacks, and obviously that significantly would be a huge boost to the Patriots as one of the teams that clearly is going after a quarterback. So, it's not just Washington or bust in all of this. There's a lot more stuff in play.
Yeah. And obviously the higher you finish on the draft board, the more difficult it is, or the fewer opportunities other teams have to leap in front of you and potentially trade up and snag a player that you were hoping to land. Right. And one last point, there is a chaos scenario, speaking of chaos scenarios, in which the Patriots, Giants, and Commanders all finish with the same record and the same strength of schedule after week 18, which would be essentially a 3-way tie for the number 2 pick. And then you would go down to further tiebreakers beyond that, be that divisional, conference record, head to head. There would be some extra considerations at play there. Probably not going to happen. A lot of games have to go in a certain way for that to be the case. But there could be a situation where it's essentially a dead heat between those 3 teams for the right to get that number 2 pick. So a lot of scoreboard watching, certainly this weekend from a Patriots perspective. I personally think they're going to beat the Jets. So I think that the odds of them getting that number 2 pick are reasonably low. But again, it is still possible that they can win and still end up at number 2 overall. I think that'll do it for this week's episode. Dakota, any final thoughts here?
No, I'm just ready for all this to be over. I just want answers to all of these questions because I'm sick of thinking about them.
Yep. Again, hopefully by next week's show, we certainly will know where the Patriots are drafting. Hopefully we will also have some clarity on who will be doing that drafting and who will be coaching those players in 2024. You can follow me on X at Zack NESN. You can follow Dakota at Dak Randall. You can follow all of our Patriots coverage before, during, and after this week 18 game and straight through the offseason at NESN.com.